Hey y'all, welcome back to my channel, and if you're new here, thanks for stopping by. Today we're going to be working on this foggy graveyard tumbler. I'm so excited with the way this one turned out. It turned out way better than I originally pictured it in my mind. So we're starting with a 30-ounce curved tumbler from the tumbler supply store, and I just prepped it and got it ready, and it's spray painted with flat white, and I let it sit overnight so I knew it was completely dry. And then I just went through my Silhouette Studio and found some designs that kind of said creepy graveyard to me in a way, kind of haunted Halloween house. So I cut those out on black vinyl, and then I took this transfer tape from Tech Rec Craft, and if you noticed at the beginning I kind of moved it. I put it on my shirt first because this vinyl or this transfer tape is super sticky, so sometimes it sticks really well to my vinyl and makes it hard to pull up. So I just gave it a little less stickiness, and then I used it to apply this house. And the way I know it's hard to apply vinyl sometimes to a curved surface, but because this isn't one solid single shape, it has a lot of like openings in it. This was not as difficult as it may seem. So I just kind of laid it where I wanted it, and I'm lining everything up originally with that seam on the very bottom of the tumbler. So what I did was I kind of placed the house where I wanted it, and then I just started in sections by laying it down, and then I'd pull off a little of the transfer tape, and then I'd lay a little bit more down, and then I'd pull off more of the transfer tape. And I just kind of did that going around the whole house, and it worked perfectly. There was minimal bubbles. There was just a couple tiny bubbles, so I just popped those as I was working with my little needle-nosed weeder pen, and it was perfect. When it laid down, you could not see any bubbles at the end. So here you see me just popping a couple of those bubbles and then pushing down the rest of the vinyl. And then towards the end, at the top peak of this little castle house, I did rip off part of the top, but I just laid it back down, and you would never know that it came off. So I just picked elements, like I said, that were kind of creepy to me. So I did a house, I did some trees that were just branches, some headstones, some bats, and everything is cut out of Oracle 651 glossy vinyl. And then the moon is out of, I believe it was gold shimmer vinyl from Hobby Lobby. I'm pretty sure that's it. And then I just placed the elements. I didn't really have a specific idea of where I was going to lay everything down. I just cut a bunch of pieces and then just kind of went for it as I kind of added stuff, what needed a space or what needed an element in a certain space, and so on and so on. Once I had all of the elements added, we're going to paint the bottom black so it doesn't look like the things are just floating, and this is when it really all starts to come together. I just used some chalk paint and a paintbrush, and I'm basically just painting where that little rim is, and then I kind of tried to stay on that rim, but then add like a little bit of raised elements just so it looked like it wasn't just a flat ground, kind of looked like actual ground. This is where, for me, it really all started to come together, so it made it really look like it was a graveyard, not just some floating elements on a white tumbler. And then this next part is one of my favorite little elements. I don't even know if anybody would really notice it, but for me, it was an accident, but I loved the way it looked. I kind of brushed up from the bottom, and it made it look like grass from this prickly paintbrush. So I went around and did it intentionally on the whole tumbler. So I didn't add any extra paint. I just kind of took what was on the paintbrush, made sure that there wasn't too much, so more like a dry brush technique, and I just flicked it up and it made it look like grass on the ground. For me, sometimes, even if I'm the only one that knows that there's a certain element on there, like this grass, nobody else may notice, like I said, but to me, when I'm working on a project, sometimes it's those little things that just, it makes it seem so much more special to me because I at least know it's there. And, you know, like in life, it's the little things sometimes. So I set that aside and let it dry completely, and now we're really going to get into the fun part. So I epoxied the whole tumbler in just regular clear epoxy, and then I took a little bit left over and added just a few drops of white alcohol ink, and I'm going to just kind of drop that on the tumbler in just random spots. And I know it's really hard to see here, and I'm sorry about this angle. Like I've told you before, my other tripod is broken, so it has to hold it at this weird angle. So anyways, I just kind of put it on in random spots, and then I took my gloved finger, and instead of like running it across, I kind of ran it across, but then patted it on as well. I know that sounds weird, but I just like took my finger and where the white streaks were, just kind of tapped it. I just didn't want it to look like a line of white across it. Like I said, it was only a few drops of white in the epoxy, just enough to give it that cloudy look and where you could see the white on the tumbler, but not enough to be so opaque you couldn't see anything. So you'll see here in the next clip where I get a little closer, and you'll be able to see where the white really stands out on the tumbler. I forgot to mention that before I added the white, I did heat it with my little torch, and then after I added the white, I gave it another little quick torch just because putting my finger in there a lot gave it a few little bubbles, so I didn't want that, so torched it real quick, and then I let that cure. And then once that was done, I cut some of the same elements out again, but some I did a little bit smaller this time, so I did a few smaller graveyard headstones, and then a smaller tree, and then I just placed those in different elements on the tumbler as well. The reason I am doing this is because it really gives a dimension to the design element, even though everything is flat and everything is the same color. With having the white clouds and fog on there and then adding elements on top of that, it really looks like things are not just one-dimensional flat. So I just added this headstone, and then I moved some stuff around, and then I added some more bats, and then we'll move on to the next step. Also, by placing these trees lined up all the way at the bottom of the tumbler instead of that original lip, it also gives the element of the different dimensions instead of being flat, because it looks like it's closer to you versus online with the original ground, if that makes sense. Same with the bats, because they're different sizes, but also because there is clouds and fog more on top of some of them, it looks like they're flying through the fog versus some of them are closer because there's not as much fog on top of them. I did the same thing with a few of these headstones. I lined them up in between the three that were already there, but then moved them down a little bit so it looked like those two were closer than the three in the back. After I had all the elements in place, we went in with a coat of epoxy again, completely clear. And then this time I am adding gray, I think it's fog, into the epoxy. And I'm now holding this and adding this epoxy one-handed. So I'm sorry that it may get a little shaky here, but I did the same thing. I went in where the same concept as when I added the white. I just put some of the epoxy on my finger and just kind of dabbed it in. This really gives it a good cloudy look. So not so much streaky, but more of a plump cloud. After I went in with this light gray fog color, I went in with a little bit darker of a gray and did the same exact thing. This really gives it part of that dimension of the different colors. With the white, it really starts to look like a foggy graveyard. Once that was dry, we went in and did the whole thing again. This time in one of the cups, I added a little bit of Diamonds and Dust luster dust in the color Pure, just to add a little bit of sparkle. You can't really see it unless you're looking up close. And then I just did the same thing. I added the little pouncing spots with the luster dust. And then this time I also went in and added, I put a little bit of white alcohol ink right on my gloved finger and then pounced that into. It just is, again, building on that different dimensions with the different colors and textures of this fog. I then went in one last time with a final clear coat of epoxy, and this time I added a little bit of that darker alcohol ink on my finger again and just kind of swooshed and pounced that in as well. And all of the coats have been thin coats of epoxy on the clear coat because the thicker the coat, you're going to have a lot of movement, and I didn't want a lot of movement when I was adding in that foggy, cloudy look. So after that, it was completely done, and I absolutely love the way it came together. It really, really does look like a foggy graveyard. I hope you love this tutorial as much as I loved working on this fun tumbler. And as always, I will leave all of my information, where to find me and the products I use, down in the description box. And if you liked what you see, I hope you give me a follow, because then you can see all my future videos. Thank you so much again for watching, and I will see you again next week with a new video. Have a happy week, y'all. Bye.